If there's one thing that I've learned over this holiday season, it's that it's a hell of a thing to kill a man. This week, we're going to be taking a look at Clint Eastwood's 1992 classic, Unforgiven, currently available now, streaming on Max. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this classic period drama. I'm Brennan, Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Alright, so this week we're going to be taking a look at Academy Award-winning movie Unforgiven, starring and directed by Clint Eastwood. Now, in the last video, I talked about Juror Number 2, which is also available on Max, and in that video, I said that I wasn't very familiar with Clint Eastwood's work. He was one of those guys who obviously everybody knows, such a memorable name, he is an icon in the industry, and yet I hadn't seen a particularly large amount of his movies, either ones that he had starred in or ones that he had directed. And so I decided that I was going to, educate myself with one of the most iconic directors and actors of the past generations. And so I watched Unforgiven. And I went into this knowing that it was an Oscar award-winning movie. I went into this knowing that it was going to be amazing. But at the same time, I went into this not expecting much because, to be truthfully honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of the Western drama. It's never really grabbed me. I mean, there are a few cases where I have enjoyed Westerns. But to be honest with you, because I'm very unfamiliar with it, when I think of and this is going to be considered heresy by those of you who are big fans of the Western, but when I think of Western, the first movie that comes to my head is the incredibly modern, deconstructivist movie by the Coen brothers, No Country for Old Men, right? So I'm very unfamiliar with the genre. I'm not a big fan of it. I have pretty much avoided it for quite a while. Shayde has been on a Western kick for a while. He's been trying to get me to watch some more. We've been discussing ideas about our own, or he's been trying to discuss ideas about making our own Western story, and I've just been supremely uninterested. But my expectations were definitely blown away. The direction here, the storytelling, the acting, all were enough to draw me in and were able to help me move past the fact that it isn't a genre that I traditionally like. Now, like I said, this movie is directed and stars Clint Eastwood, but the rest of the cast is absolutely phenomenal. It's very stacked. Like I said, we got Clint Eastwood playing Bill Munny, Gene Hackman playing this aged sheriff, Little Bill Daggett, who is who's arguably the main villain of the film. I would say he's certainly the antagonist towards the end, though the conflict with him is not actually the impetus for the beginning of the movie. And then we also have Morgan Freeman playing longtime partner of Clint Eastwood, Ned Logan, the sharpshooting man. I mean, let's be honest here, Morgan Freeman is just amazing in anything. I did not expect to see him in this, though. And I think it's because even though this movie was made in 1992, I don't know, there's something about Clint Eastwood where he just looks so old all of the time that for some reason I had thought that this movie was older than 1992. And so seeing Morgan Freeman, I was like, oh, this is a shock. But he's great for really how little we get to see him. Truthfully, we don't get to see him nearly as much as I would like. But I think he does a great job. We also have Richard Harris. Richard Harris as English Bob, most famously known in our generation as the first Dumbledore in, it would have been the first two, I think. Which, for some reason, Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets, that was almost embarrassing. And then we also have Jaimz Woolvet as the Schofield Kid. Now, this is an actor who I was very unfamiliar with. I don't think I have actually seen him in anything else at all. And I could be wrong here. There could be something that I'm missing. But he looked very familiar, but looking through the filmography, I don't think there's a single thing. And he was surprisingly good. He did a great job about playing this character who in the beginning you really, really hate, right? He's sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know if this is quite accurate, but like say, he's very a blowhard, I guess. He thinks he is the next, major sharpshooter. He is the next big outlaw. He's the next Billy the Kid. I don't know what the timeline is. I don't know when Billy the Kid was around, to be honest with you. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not even 100% sure Billy the Kid is a real person. I'm pretty sure, but it could just be completely fictionalized. No, he was a real kid. Okay. Or not a real kid, but a real person. Born 1859, died 1881. Okay, so more or less around the same time. I mean, the movie here takes place in, I want to say in large part in 1880, with just the opening scene taking place in 1878. And just because I brought it up and I sort of, pulled myself into this accidentally, I do just want to take a moment here to talk about that opening scene. What a beautiful shot. And I mean, that's the way, like if we're talking about a movie that I'm not necessarily predisposed towards liking, if it's a genre that we dislike, the way to pull me in is a supremely amazing opening shot. And we just get this long establishing shot of I suppose ranch is probably the proper word here. Ranch? Homestead, maybe? I don't know what the terminology would be, but we see this long establishing shot of the home of Clint Eastwood, Will Munny, and there's like some text, an opening scrawl, if you will, in the beginning that describes the past events about Clint Eastwood marrying this young girl, much to the young girl's mother's chagrin, because Will Munny is this this outlaw essentially. And the opening scene, if I remember correctly, is just the silhouette of Clint Eastwood burying his wife. And it's absolutely amazing. And so that single shot is beautiful. But then after that, we get this really, really compelling intro where we introduce the main conflict here, where we have these two scoundrels, I suppose, is probably the best word to use here. These two scoundrels who are partaking in the services of some lovely escorts. That is obviously not the way that they are referred. That's not how they're referred to in the movie. And so I'm going to substitute a word that they use a lot with lovely escorts. Because I don't feel comfortable saying it like 30 times. I think out of context, it would make my neighbors not think I'm a good person. But so we get this opening scene where we establish the conflict, right? There is this scoundrel who is, again, partaking in the services of this young lady. And she, giggles at an aspect of his anatomy, and he freaks out and he lashes out and he cuts her up, cuts her face and cuts her other parts of her anatomy. This would truthfully be a very family unfriendly episode. And I didn't think about that until after I had started this. So it's going to be a little awkward here, but in any case, so he cuts her up, and then the revealing shot of the owner of the billiards establishment, who I believe his name is Skinny Dubois, played by Anthony Jaimz. That was really, really interesting. And it did it in a way where, obviously it sort of surprises you a little bit. It's not the way that you necessarily expect it to go. And then when it does happen, you think, oh, this is a main character, right? This is somebody who is incredibly important to the storyline. But it's not. It's just the owner of the establishment, and he, basically removes the two gentlemen from the situation. They call in the sheriff, who is played by none other than Gene Hackman, who needs no introduction. One of the most prolific actors from, I don't know, I would say maybe the mid to late 70s into the 80s or so. Let's see, when was French Connection? 71. I don't think that was really his breakout role, but that's the earliest thing that I remember him in. Oh no, I Never Sang for My Father. I know that one's very well known. That was in 1970. So in any case, yes, through the 70s and the 80s, mostly in the 70s, man, he's cranking out a lot here. But one of the most well-known actors, I first came into contact with him, obviously, in Superman the movie as Lex Luthor, in which he absolutely killed it. Those not necessarily the Lex Luthor that I like, but that's besides the point. That's for a separate episode. Gene Hackman here as Little Bill Daggett is such an interesting character. Obviously, like I said, it's Gene Hackman, so you know that the performance is going to be amazing. But the character development throughout the entire movie is really, really interesting. He is this very, very strict law and order man, right? He's the antagonist of the film, but he's not necessarily the villain, right? It's not like he is the evil man. He's not one of the people who cuts up the lovely escorts, right? He is the sheriff of, I believe the town is called Big Whiskey, which is just a great name. He's got I'm just trying to remember, there's some really great dialogue here when he's beaten up on English Bob, but I forget. In any case, the character development is really interesting. Like I said, he's not your traditional villain, right? And it's interesting to see him opposite Clint Eastwood's Bill Munny. And maybe we should talk about Clint Eastwood himself a little bit before I get to the end of Gene Hackman's story arc here. Seeing these two in juxtaposition is really, really interesting because, like we said from the opening scrawl, Clint Eastwood, Bill Munny, is this scoundrel, right? He's an outlaw who has complete disregard for human life. As it slowly gets revealed throughout the movie, in his past he has done horrible, horrible things, right? But he's a changed man now. He's a changed man, and he's a changed man because of his wife. His wife, Claudia, civilized him. And her passing on 2 years prior to the beginning of this film has left him a little bit broken, right? He is not the same. You know, when you are an evil man and you become a good man because of someone else, when you lose the thing or the person that makes you a good person, then you struggle, to understand, and you struggle to find the meaning and such. And so Clint Eastwood, he's going through some hard times, and I really, really like the way throughout his story arc throughout this whole thing, where he's constantly fighting against this past part of himself, constantly saying how he's changed, how Claudia has made him a better person. And then Ned there's one line where Ned, played by Morgan Freeman, says, you wouldn't be doing this if Claudia were here. And yet for the entirety of the movie, Bill Munny is arguing. He's saying, no, Claudia has made me a better person. I am only doing this because of the circumstances I'm in. It's not like how it was in the past where I had, complete disregard. He even mentions throughout the movie how when he did all those things, he says something like, I was drunk most of the time. The Schofield Kid asks him, were you scared? And Clint Eastwood says, I don't know. I was drunk most of the time. And when he's talking of his wife, Claudia, he says that she cured me of drink and of wickedness. And I thought that was just such a great line. I thought it was so well delivered. And it's interesting to see how that affects him throughout the entire thing. And it's interesting to see what am I trying to say here? The vehicle of alcohol throughout this and how it influences Clint Eastwood. So this movie is, 30 years old? 32 years old, so I don't necessarily feel bad, so slight spoiler warning here. But like I said, it's old, so if you haven't seen it, I don't know why you'd be watching the video in the first place, but whatever. It's definitely worth the watch. If you hadn't got that so far, I would say it's worth the watch. But I think I should have filibustered long enough now for you who do not want to be spoiled to have clicked off the video. So let's get into this. So throughout the entirety of the movie, Clint Eastwood is refusing to drink. He's saying that he's quit the whiskey. There's 3 or 4 different times where Morgan Freeman tries to offer him a drink, and each time Clint says no. And so we go throughout the course of the story, and I guess I don't think I've actually mentioned what the plot is here. Basically, the lovely escorts who work at the billiards establishment have pooled all their money together and have essentially put out a bounty on the men who have cut up the singular lovely escort. And so Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, and Jaimz Woolvet, Will Munny, Ned Logan, and the Schofield Kid are all after this bounty. And Gene Hackman's Little Bill Daggett is saying, this is not that kind of town. There will be no scoundrels. There will be no outlaws here. And so, where was I going with this? Yes. Clint Eastwood and, the crew of outlaws, I was trying to come up with a fun name for them, but I couldn't think of it. In any case, our trio of heroes, if you will, are going after this bounty, and I'm not going to explicitly spoil everything, because I do think that would be rude, even though it is 30 years old. Basically, they catch up to the gentleman for whom they are searching, and Morgan Freeman basically chokes, right? Or maybe choke isn't necessarily the proper word, because it's not like he tries to and fails. It's like he shoots, and then he decides that this is not who he is anymore, and he wants to go home. And so Morgan Freeman is on the way home, and while he's on the way home, he gets picked up by Little Bill Daggett's men and essentially tortured. And then after the torturing, he's an old man, his body and heart can't stand up to it, so he passes on. And his body gets strung out in front of the billiards parlor as a warning to any other would-be outlaws. Okay, and so Morgan Freeman, basically his dead body, to put it bluntly, gets strung outside of this billiards parlor as a way to deter any other outlaws. And Clint Eastwood and the Schofield Kid, Jaimz Woolvet, are unaware of this, and so they just continue on with the bounty. They continue on, and after they accomplish the deed, they are on top of a hill and waiting for one of the lovely escorts to drop off the payment for the bounty. And it's at this moment that Clint Eastwood learns what has happened to his former partner, his longtime friend, for a long time, his only friend, Ned Logan. And it's only when he learns this does he decide to take a drink. And when he takes a drink, he takes the drink hard. He hits the bottle. He takes 3 or 4, maybe probably, I'm pretty sure only just 4 pulls while the lady is describing. While she's telling him what's going on, he takes 4 pulls from the bottle, and he basically decides, okay, I'm going for revenge. And he goes into the town, and he basically becomes the old Will Munny. He just murders everybody in the billiards parlor. I mean, not everybody. He does have some, I don't know if mercy is the correct word, but he does have some. He's not just a complete maniac. He says at one point, any man who doesn't want to die, go out the back or some such. And he gives them an opportunity to leave. And this is after he has disabled all of the police force, And it's really, really interesting because they have this, while they're in the billiards parlor, there are people, I'm pretty sure it's mostly just Bill Daggett, who is basically telling everybody in the bar who this is. He's like, Will Munny, the man who has murdered men, women, and children. And he just goes, yep, that's me. And he doesn't even bother. And it's really, really fascinating. I think it's a really, really interesting device, the alcohol here. And it's a really interesting character plot point I think it really does a good job of describing this character and describing how destructive the alcohol is. And I think it does a great job of, there's that overarching theme that's always constantly in the background of how a good woman, a good wife, will civilize a hardened and evil man. And I think in a lot of cases that's true, even for men who aren't evil, right? It is the idea that finding a woman makes you a better person. And I think that is true like 90% of the time. At least that's true of good marriages, right? And it's really, really fascinating. And it does make me wonder if Clint Eastwood himself, or if somebody in Clint Eastwood's life has struggled with alcoholism, right? Because granted, like I said, I haven't seen much of his work, so I've seen Juror Number 2 and this, but both of them, major themes throughout the entire movie have been alcoholism. And so I'm curious, I know that he, being 93 years old, has said multiple times that the reason that he's lived so long and been so healthy is because he just does clean living, right? And so presumably he doesn't now and hasn't for a while. Doing some preliminary Googling, I don't think he has through his life, but I wonder if there is someone in his family who has suffered from this and caused him to suffer as well. And so because of that, he sort of puts this theme throughout this. Granted, like I said, it's only 2 movies, but it's like that meme of Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb, where he's like, this is a paraphrasing Doofenshmirtz, if I had a nickel for each time I watched a Clint Eastwood movie that has heavy themes about alcohol, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, you know? I don't know. I'm curious about that. Or maybe it's just I happen to pick these movies, you know, for whatever reason. These ones just happen to have these themes throughout it. I don't know, but it's really interesting. It's a great story device, and I love the development that we get from Clint Eastwood here. And it's not necessarily positive development, right? I would argue that it's actually negative development, right? Like, he becomes a worse man. Maybe worse isn't the proper word, but throughout the course of the film, he is, slowly reverting to the man that he was before he met Claudia. And so the question is, after the movie ends, do we think he returns to a Bill Munny, or do you think he returns to actively honoring his wife's legacy, or does he return to the old Bill Munny? Is he going to fall off the wagon again? Is he going to be an evil man? I don't know. It's a really, really interesting question. I mean, it's pretty evident that he's not going to be an evil man, a strictly evil man, because even when he's riding out of the town at the end, he says anybody who cuts up or otherwise hurts these lovely escorts is going to have to deal with me, and I'll come back and kill him or whatever. And so it's clear that he is not evil for evil's sake, right? He is, well, I suppose it's the standard archetype for a Western, right? He is a good man who has good intentions and has to do evil things to achieve these good ends. It's really, really interesting. Now, one final thing that I want to say here, I want to mention the Schofield Kid. I talked about him a little bit early on. Earlier, I said that I think the movie does a great job of having him be this irritable little boy, right? This guy who you love to hate, right? He's the kind of character who, I mean, he's just straight up rude to Morgan Freeman. He idolizes Bill Munny. We can tell from the very beginning that he's fronting. He's putting up airs, or putting on airs. We can tell that he is putting up a facade and that he is not the man that he says he is. He claims that he is this hardened killer, and throughout, the course of the movie, it becomes more and more evident that that's just simply not true. And then we get to this climactic scene, right? We get to this hill after they have finished the bounty, or finished off the bounties. Clint Eastwood murders the first man, and the Schofield Kid murders the second man. And Clint Eastwood is just standing on the hill. He's staring out at the town, watching the lovely escort arrive with the payment, and the Schofield Kid is just leaning up against this tree, and he is a little bit destitute, right? But he's trying to front. He's trying to appear to be this, this hardened killer, right? He's trying to laugh it off and trying to be like, it is what it is. But it's clear that throughout the entire interaction, he's in shock, right? It's clear that he's in shock. He's understanding what's happening. Throughout the course of this scene, he slowly begins to break down into tears. And then at the end of it, he decides, he tells Clint Eastwood, you can keep my revolver. Or no, he says, you can keep my payment and you can keep my revolver because I'm not a killer. And I think that's really, really well done. I thought it was a great performance. Like I said, I'm fairly certain that I'm completely unfamiliar with this guy. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. And looking through his filmography, it's looking like most of these I'm not really gonna watch. Some of them I'll probably put on at some point. I'm sure there's a few that are worth it, but it was just an amazing performance here, and especially that final scene was so well delivered. And it's that I love the theme that we explore through this Schofield Kid of like everybody wants to be tough, but when you make that final leap, when you cross the line, there's no coming back, and it changes you forever. I think it's really well done. Like I said, beautiful performance, amazing script. The movie itself looked beautiful. I talked a little bit, I suppose, just about that opening shot. But then we end out the movie, and it's a perfect bookend. It is the exact same shot, except I believe Clint Eastwood is like praying in the beginning part of the second shot, and then in the end, it like fades away to. I wonder if, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if that was Clint Eastwood's outline. It could have been the outline of Claudia's mom. But in any case, it fades. It's the same shot, but then it fades to like where there's no person there, and it's just the structure, just the tree, and just the funeral. It's not a tombstone. I don't know. In any case, the word's not going to come to me right now. It's very beautifully done, and there are less shots throughout the movie where I was blown away, but there were some in particular. There's one where I believe this is the scene where Gene Hackman is beaten up on English Bob, on Alfred, on Albus Dumbledore. And there is we transition like away from a Steadicam or away from a tripod shot to a handheld shot, and it's very well done. It sort of describes like the emotional state that Gene Hackman is. He's relatively calm and collected, but here he's lost his cool a bit. He's yelling out at the people in the town. I really wish I could remember what he says there, but it's something about you think I'm talking, or you say I'm talking, and I'm talking to the villains in Kansas, and I'm talking to the villains in Missouri, and he says something about how there is no lovely escort's gold, and it is just it's just really good. I'm not going to find that clip. In any case, it is, like I said, I think it's very, very well done. I would say that it's 100% worth the watch, right? And again, to be honest, that's not exactly, again, it's not a hot take. This is widely regarded as a very good movie, 8.2 stars. It's got an 85 Metacritic score, and it won 4 Oscars, right? So it's not a hot take. It won for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Gene Hackman, Best Director for Clint Eastwood, and Best Editing for Joel Cox. And then it was nominated for Sound, Art Direction, Cinematography, Writing, and Actor in a Leading Role. Who beat out Clint Eastwood for Best Actor in a Leading Role? That would be interesting to see. Where we got 93. Oh, Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman. I have not heard that. But this is a pretty stacked year when we look at the the Oscars here. We got Pacino, who won for Scent of a Woman. We got Robert Downey Jr. for Chaplin. Obviously Eastwood for Unforgiven. Stephen Rea for The Crying Game. And Denzel for Malcolm X. Man. And then Al Pacino was also nominated in Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Glengarry Glen Ross. Quite a year. He didn't win that. He didn't win Supporting Role. That was Gene Hackman. So take that, Al. You only get one of them. I'm surprised that Denzel didn't win for Malcolm X, though. I don't know if Clint Eastwood is necessarily. I wouldn't have given him the win for Best Actor. But in any case, the point. The reason that I brought this up originally is to say that, like, it's not a hot take, obviously, to say that this is a good movie and that it's worth a watch. But this is coming from somebody who isn't a big fan of Westerns, right? This is coming from somebody who had who was very unfamiliar with Clint Eastwood. Definitely worth it, I would say. So, like I said, this movie is currently streaming on Max. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this classic movie. If you think it's worthy of the classic title, or if you think that it is way overrated, let me know down below. Make sure that you subscribe for more nerd content and commentary. Hit the notifications bell so that you never miss another episode, and I will see you guys next time.